not in our usual room due to the Senate Ways and Means Committee and the House Appropriations Committee are having a joint meeting, and they need the biggest room for that. That is the old Supreme Court room, which is where we usually meet. And this room is hardly big enough to hold this committee, but we're glad it does. We are the biggest committee in the Senate. So thank you to our conferees and those following along in the committee meeting room for finding our location today also. So it's just for today only. We will not be meeting tomorrow. We won't be meeting on Monday due to the holiday. So when we meet again on Tuesday, it will be in 346 South, our usual meeting room. And with that, we're going to then request any bill introductions. I'm going to introduce the first one this year, and it is number 25 RS 0259, and it is an act concerning family law related to child support obligations. And with that, then the bill will be so introduced. Do we have any other requests for bill introductions from the committee meeting room? Yes, please come to the podium, introduce yourself, and welcome to committee.
Am I on?
I'm not sure. Speak. Say something.
Hi, I'm Julie Mangini. I'm the
There we go.
Government Affairs Director for the Kansas Department of Labor. I'm here to request introduction of 25 RS 0284, which is a bill regarding fingerprinting and background checks for certain employees at the Kansas Department of Labor.
Thank you. And with that, the bill will be introduced.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Do we have any other requests for bill introductions in the committee meeting room? I don't see any. Do we have any committee members who have any bills to introduce? Not seeing any. Then great. Then we will, first committee, have a briefing from our revisor on Kansas Open Meetings Act and Kansas Open Records Act. It's always good to get this reminder both for colleagues who have served before, and because of our committee of 13, we do have 8 new senators on the committee. So, and we want to make sure that we're in compliance with KOMA and KORA. So with that then, Ms. Natalie Scott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, committee. I'm just going to give you kind of a pretty brief overview of the requirements under KOMA and KORA, and then I'm happy to take any questions that you all may have. I'm going to start with KOMA, the Kansas Open Meetings Act. You all are subject to KOMA. That act generally does apply to the legislature, all your committees and subcommittees, unless the House or Senate rules creates an exemption in the rules, and they have not done so. So KOMA does apply to this body. First, I'm going to talk about what constitutes a meeting. Under the Act, a meeting is defined as any gathering or assembly via any method of interactive two-way communication, which would include electronic communication, or that occurs in any location or social situation that involves a majority of the voting members of the body for the purposes of engaging in a discussion, two-way dialogue about the business of the body. So if this whole body decided after this meeting you want to go to lunch and you guys talk about the weather and your kids and the Chiefs, that is not a meeting because you're not talking about the business of this meeting. So it requires more than just all of you being in a room together. KOMA does require that meetings be open to the public. Public access must be available, and then notice of the meetings is required to be provided if requested. Usually for legislative meetings, that duty is delegated to our committee assistant. As you guys all know, we kind of go above and beyond on those notice requirements. The statute just requires notice to be given to those who have requested notice. But we put notice on the website, usually outside the building. So we provide a lot of notice. Along with access, we go a little above and beyond what the statute requires. Our meetings are live streamed on WebEx. You can do the audio from our website as well. But really what's required is that this door be open and members of the public can come in. That's all that the statute requires. So sometimes, if streaming goes down, we'll alert the chair, and she can make a decision, but that audio video streaming is not required for you guys to be compliant with KOMA. So those are the big parts of KOMA that I wanted to go over. Now I'll kind of briefly go over KORA. KORA is the Kansas Open Records Act. It also applies to this body, so it requires that the public records of this public agency be open for inspection. The term public agency is defined, but essentially this committee and subcommittees fall under the definition of a public agency, essentially because they're supported by public funds that are appropriated by the state. So that's how that application goes. If you do get a KORA request, feel free to reach out to our office. You can reach out to me. You can reach out to Gordon self directly. We're always able to help you respond to those open records requests. It doesn't happen all too often because, again, with KORA, we also kind of go above and beyond what the statute requires. All of your guys' meeting materials are posted on the website. They're usually emailed out to the listserv of anyone who's interested and has requested notice of these meetings. So typically, that documentation is very readily available from lots of sources. But if you do get a KORA request, you are required to make an initial response within 3 days of receiving that request. So if you do get a request, don't kind of sit on that, just send it to our office and we would be happy to help you with responding to that. Enforcement of both KOMA and KORA, that's generally done by either the district attorney or the attorney general. There can be fines involved. There's also sometimes some remedial classes that you might be required to take if you're found in violation of KOMA and KORA. But that's never happened to any committee in the 13 years I've been here, so I don't anticipate that will happen to you all. But that's all. I think those are the highlights. Again, if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? I think you probably received a little bit of the briefing in your orientation this year. So we'll keep that in mind that Natalie is a great resource if you have questions, and if you get a KORA request, get those turned in, please, to the revisor right away. So thank you very much, Natalie. With that, then, we're going to have 2 presentations today. Do want to make sure that we're able to adjourn by noon at the latest. So I'm going to ask, since we got started a little late due to the change in room and we've got to get technology set up, it's 10:45 now, if we could have the Department of Corrections presentation first, and we'll try to conclude that around 11:30, and then we'll hear from Kansas Legal Services. So with that, then, want to welcome back our Department of Corrections Secretary, Mr. Jeff Zamuda, and welcome back to committee. So
Thank you, Madam Chair. Am I on here? Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. It's good to be here with you today. I am Jeff Zamuda. I currently serve as the Secretary for Kansas Department of Corrections, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you this morning to present some information about our agency and what we have going on. Before I begin the presentation, I'd like to introduce a member of my executive team that who you'll see a lot of in the during the session, and that is Jennifer King. She's our Executive Director of Public Affairs. So if you have a question or a concern regarding our agency and you see Jennifer or want to reach out to her, she's certainly there as a resource for you. I understand we're having some technical difficulties, so I'm not going to be pulling the presentation up on the screen, but I think you have a hard copy in front of you, so I apologize for that. But if you can follow along, I'll try to call out the page numbers as I move forward. I understand we have a few new members to the committee, so I'm going to go over some basic information, give you a flavor of the agency and what we do, and I'm hopeful that through the presentation and questions you may ask, that it really helps you kind of get up to speed. On the agenda on page 2, I'm going to give you an agency overview. I'm going to talk a little bit about our staffing, talk a little bit about our population and the growth that we're seeing there, educational programming and opportunities there, some digital upgrades that we have, capital improvements in our agency, reentry in our career campus vision, and then a potential nursery at the Topeka Correctional Facility. If you go to slide 3, just quickly at a glance, some fast facts. 95% of the incarcerated population will one day return to the community. I think there's a misnomer or a misbelief by some in the public that people come to prison and people kind of wash their hands of them. That's simply not the case. 95% who come to prison in Kansas make their way back to the community at one point. 58% of the adults in the system serve 1 year or less in prison, and 76% serve 2 years or less in our facilities. Those who obtain a livable wage job after discharge are 1/3 less likely to return to prison. Getting that good job makes a big difference. And I'll talk a lot about trying to prep people, helping prep people for their return in those jobs. We have educational opportunities, higher ed partners at each one of our 8 adult and our 1 juvenile facility. We have 10 Kansas college universities that partner with us. We're excited about that partnership. And then our Office of Victim Services provided services to nearly 45,000 registered crime victims last year. And that looks like notifying them of where an individual might be in the system, notifying them if that individual should pass or they're about to be released, that type thing. On page 4, I want to go through a few activities that I think warrant highlighting, some bigger than others, kind of a year in review. We have gardens at some of our facilities. We have 3 facilities that the gardens that are growing there help feed folks out in the community. Those are at Lansing, Norton, and Hutchinson. And the garden at Hutchinson was recognized by K-State as one of the best in the state, so we think that's pretty cool. We have a Wheels of the World program that we operate out of our facility in Ellsworth. That's where wheelchairs that have fallen in disrepair are donated or brought to us, and it's a national program. We're not the only correctional system participating, but our population refurbishes them, gets them ready, and then they go back out into the community in the U.S. Many go outside the country for donation for use by those folks that need them. Since 2002, that program nationally has refurbished 200,000 wheelchairs. It's really phenomenal. And then our population often volunteers on community projects to help local communities, particularly smaller communities, with some of their projects. And recently we helped rebuild a park in Augusta. On page 5, some more year in the review. Our food service contractor, Aramark, initiated a culinary program in our system. It's called Into Work. It's a food service certification that our population that works in food service and obtains that can use that upon their release. It's recognized throughout the country. Excited about that. This past fall, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, we opened our first substance use recovery and work release unit combined. It's over at our Lansing campus, and the focus of that 200-bed unit is to help people with that addiction, break that spell of addiction, and help them prepare to return to the community through those work opportunities out there. They go out in the day and return at night, and so it kind of transitions them. And then finally, Kansas Correctional Industries expanding their work training program in our correctional facilities by constructing additional buildings where we can have private industry partners come on site, engage with our population, hire them as their employees, pay them, and have them learn some work skills.
Mr. Secretary, I'm going to interrupt real quickly. You have a lot of great information to provide. We want to make sure those following along online can hear you. So can you just adjust your microphone a little bit up closer to where you're speaking, then we can make sure you're heard.
Better, Madam Chair?
I think
maybe?
so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I apologize for that. And then on page 6, let's see if we're here yet. Yeah, okay, I'm caught up. I think we have the slide presentation going now. So just some events that we believe will inspire some hope and change in that population. We're charged with incarcerating folks, and we're also charged with changing folks and helping them become good citizens when they return. So we're about 3 years into a partnership with an international group based out of the U.S., the Gift of Chess. They come in, they expose our population to the benefit of disciplining your mind and your impulses by playing chess pretty disciplined, and a lot of our population could use that discipline. And they sponsor tournaments, and we just get a lot of positive activity going there, and it really helps some folks. And then at our women's facility here in Topeka, musical artist Melissa Etheridge, who's a native Kansan out of the Lansing and Leavenworth area, reached out to us and asked if she could come and put on a concert for those women. She has a heart for them and helping them get back on their feet. She wrote some original music. We filmed a documentary in there, and that's out there and with great success, and we appreciate her coming. Okay, it's not moving. Okay, here we go. Okay, this is a map, a little bit about the makeup of our agency now. This map reflects the location of our 8 adult facilities and our 1 juvenile. Now, 3 of our facilities, you'll see more than 9 white boxes up there. It's because 3 of our facilities have satellites. Wichita Work Release is a satellite of the Winfield facility. Our facility in Stockton is a satellite from our Norton facility, and then Oswego is a satellite of our facility, our El Dorado facility. Our 1 facility for women is here in Topeka, as is our juvenile facility. This map reflects locations and geographic areas for our parole offices. The number of people that we supervise on probation, on parole, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, and that's kind of where they're located. A little bit about authorized positions and personnel for the agency. In this slide, the graph is broken down into uniformed and non-uniformed positions. Uniformed positions, correctional officer, correctional supervisor, correctional lieutenant, captain, major. Those are by far the bulk of our staff, the largest group of our staff, and then we have non-uniform positions. Non-uniform positions might be records clerk, they might be counselors, they might be the accountants, maintenance, all those type of folks. The graph includes facilities, parole and central office, which are combined in 1 budget unit, and then Kansas Correctional Industries. So we have 3,476.5 positions. Okay, a little deeper dive on our workforce. This slide reflects numbers captured on June 30th, the end of this past fiscal year. Men comprise 63% of our workforce, women 37%. Slide reflects the staff numbers by both racial and ethnic groups. Staffing levels throughout the agency have stabilized considerably compared to what we were experiencing during the COVID pandemic and shortly thereafter. A significant factor that has improved the situation is the investment that's been made by the governor and the legislature in compensation for the workforce. That over the past 3 years, there's been a considerable investment there, and I'll show you a graph a little bit later that I think will illustrate how that's helped. So thank you to Governor and to everyone in the legislature that played a role in that. So this slide and the one that follow help illustrate the impact that those wages have had on vacancies in uniform positions. And again, they're by far the largest segment of our employees. That's why I'm focused on them. So the graph reflects vacancies in uniform and security positions at adult facilities. And at the far left, and there's a yellow box with an arrow that kind of points to it. That's January 2022. We had 470 or 26% of our uniform positions were vacant. That was way too high. That resulted in a lot of 16-hour days for folks. Sometimes we had to go to 12-hour shifts rather than 8 to help provide coverage. Oftentimes, folks would work 3 or 4 16-hour shifts in a week, way too much. So we were really in a bad spot. Increases in base pay and some differentials that were applied during the pandemic are indicated by where those orange vertical bars are. And I know they're a little difficult to see on the slide, but they're in close proximity to those yellow boxes in the arrow as well. So wherever you see an orange vertical bar, that's where an investment was made nearby there. And again, the most, we had one in July of 2023. You can see things have stayed pretty flat. It kind of moves a little bit seasonally, but we're doing pretty good there. The period July 2023 to date, considerable improvement. At one point this past spring to fall, we had 22 consecutive weeks with 200 or less vacancies. Today, our vacancies are about 210, that's 11%. So we went from 26% in 2022 to 11%, and we've been as low as 9% this past fall. Great improvement. The slide reflects the impact that those increased wages and compensation have had on vacancies and uniform positions at our juvenile facility here in Topeka. Timeline and implementations are all aligned with what you saw on the adult slide. In January 2022, we had 45 vacancies in uniform positions at that facility. That was a 29% vacancy in uniforms. Today, we have 13 vacancies. That's 7%. Vast improvement. Another factor impacting our ability to fill our positions has been our strategies with recruitment. During the height of our vacancies, we were really struggling and competing with everybody, much like out in the private sector. Everybody saw it. There just weren't enough folks to fill all the jobs that were out there, and so it was a very competitive market, and we were not very nimble in being able to reach out and capture candidates. So we have contracted with a national firm that's done recruitment for law enforcement and other corrections agencies throughout the country. They've got about 6 other corrections agencies that they've done work for. We've gotten very good reports on the work that they did. And so what they do is they get out on the digital platforms. They use a various number of strategies to touch people and get people to at least show some interest. And then when that individual shows some interest, then they reach out to them, they contact them, and they try to encourage them to get in the pipeline, maybe schedule an interview, conduct an interview, and then hire them. So on the slide, on the left of that big blue box that's on the slide, you'll see a funnel. And that funnel, it starts out with all the people in that big blue section, all the people that they kind of touched or had contact with. And then as it whittles down, as some of those are willing to schedule an interview, of those that schedule an interview, fewer show up for the interview and actually do interview, and then even fewer are actually hired on. But we've had great success. On the right side in that blue box talks about some costs, and I'll just say after the interview's completed and we've hired somebody, we're spending about $1,835 per person that comes through that process. But when you consider the amount of overtime that we pay when we have a position open, it's not comparable. That's more cost effective. It's in place at all of our correctional facilities, and we're going to roll it out to our parole regions soon. So recruitment and hiring's going pretty well. We need to continue our efforts to improve our ability to retain folks. That's how we really get out of it. I think everybody knows that. We've got to do a better job of getting folks in, getting them acclimated to the work, getting them to feel comfortable, and then getting them to stay. Our turnover rate from July of 2023 through July of 2024, 1st of July, was about 35%. Now, corrections typically has a pretty high turnover rate. I think you'll see across the country, it'll be in the 20s, 30s. So that's not way outside the norm. But how it impacts us is 58% of our correctional officers today have 2 years or less experience. That's what's meaningful. I believe it takes 2 years on the job. Corrections is a very challenging, very difficult work. Dealing with a very challenging population and how to deal with them. Just just takes experience. You can train to it all day and until you're out there on the floor dealing with folks. So getting that experience level of our officers, getting more of them beyond that 2 years, once they get beyond 2 years, they kind of get it. So we've got to do a better job of that. We have 661 of our 1,131 correctional officers today that have 2 years or less experience. So retention is important. As part of retention, this past year and in this budget, for this budget year, Legislature funded an upgrade to staff uniforms, and we're very appreciative of that. We needed to upgrade our game on our uniforms. Uniforms are very important to uniform staff. They're important to us, how they look, makes them feel good about what they're doing. So we're upgrading on uniforms, and we believe that'll help us as well. And then a continuing emphasis with regard to retaining people is improving the work environment. Whether it's the physical plant, and I'll talk at length a little bit later about physical plant, but whether it's paint on the walls and good carpeting, adequate lighting, ventilation, that physical plant's important. Necessary functioning equipment, you know, do you have computers that work well? Are the firearms and the radios in good order? And then lastly, and certainly not the least, is our culture. Making sure that we have a culture where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. We treat each other that way, we treat the public that way, and we treat our population in that manner. I'll talk a little bit about population and what's going on there, give you a little bit of background on what they look like and what we're seeing. So individuals, we have two groups of individuals under our authority. We have folks in facilities, incarcerated, and then we have folks on parole, post-incarceration that we supervise for a while. Our adult population coming to prison continues to increase. Pre-pandemic, in the May of 2019, we had a high of nearly 10,100 adult people in our system, 10,100. During the pandemic, as the courts kind of shut down a little bit and maybe there wasn't as much activity out there, March of 2022, that number dropped to just under 8,300. So that was a pretty significant drop, and that was helpful when we had those severe staffing shortages. We were able to collapse housing units and congregate the population, and allowed us to better utilize the resources that we had. But it's been on the uptick since the end of the pandemic, and I'll just use the last year. In January 24 through January 1st, 25, we had a net gain of nearly 600 adults coming into the prison system. That's in a 12-month period. And I'll show you some projections from the Sentencing Commission here in a minute. We have 163 juveniles in our custody in our facility here in Topeka. That number is up this past year after being in the 140s area for about 2-3 years. I'm not quite sure what's driving that. It had jumped up to as high as 190 and then has kind of settled back down halfway between where it had been and the high. So keeping an eye on that. And then we supervise about 5,400 adults in the community on that post-incarceration or parole, if you will. That's an increase of about 150 this past year. As more people come into prison, you're going to eventually have more people come out on some form of supervision. That's certainly not an all-time high, but it is growing. This map provides a sense of where Kansas is in relationship to the rest of the country with regard to the rate of incarceration for adults. 648 per 100,000 is where Kansas ranks. So for every 100,000 people out in the community, adults in the community, we have about 648. That's about in the middle on a national ranking. The high is Louisiana with 1,067, and Massachusetts is the low with 241. So at 648, we're just about right in the middle. Some demographics here on this slide regarding the adult population in our correctional facilities. Our women are 79% white, 16% black, African American, and then there's some others there. And then our men are about 66% white, 29% black or African American with some other races. More demographics here. Women, 90% non-Hispanic. Men, 85% non-Hispanic. Spend a couple minutes talking about recidivism. If you're not familiar with the term, recidivism means when someone has been incarcerated, they've been released, and then they come back to prison. It's been a national measure for a number of years, and it's evolving. It's evolved in a couple ways. A few years ago, the standard was established that if someone leaves incarceration, leaves prison, and they're out in the community for at least 3 years and don't come back to prison, they're deemed to have been successful upon release and not recidivated. So they're not included in a recidivism number. 3 years or longer, without coming back to prison, they're deemed to have been successful. That's a national standard that everybody's measuring. So the other thing that I think is changing in our industry, you know, there's a lot of focus on that recidivism is a negative number. That's the failures. That's the people that don't make it. If you look on the graph, we have 75% that were successful. And I prefer to talk about view it from the 75% successful range. Most get out, some with help from us, some on their own, find their way and don't come back to it. So the bars on the left on this graph are overall recidivism, and it shows that recidivism has been declining. Success rate has been growing. The other sets of bars on the graph reflect the reason why those folks that returned to prison did. So in the middle, you've got conditional release violators. So that's someone that's on parole that has a terms of conditions, and they didn't adhere to them enough to the point where they were violated and came back to prison to serve more time. And then on the right, it's people that while they were out, during that 3-year period, picked up a new conviction. They committed a new crime and were convicted of that. A little bit about operating costs for the agency. The pie chart, and got some bullets up there up on the right. The pie chart reflects costs associated with various elements of the agency budget. The overall agency budget is about $638 million. The 3 largest segments of the budget are facility operations, operating those prisons. That's about 51% of the budget. Healthcare for the incarcerated population comprises about 15% of our budget, and then juvenile services makes up about 13%. And that juvenile services, that's not only our juvenile facility, but that's juvenile services out in the community. I'll talk a little bit later about community corrections, but we have a grant process. The state, funds a grant process that helps supervise people on probation and provide services and whatnot out there. So juveniles is the third. Information on the slide regarding cost per day and cost per year to incarcerate an individual. It's about $110 a day, just over $40,000 annual cost. Cost of supervision in the community, parole is about $2,800 annually, and probation is about $3,200, nearly $3,300 annually. And probation is diverting someone from coming to prison, correctional facility. A little bit about our adult facility capacity. So I've mentioned the adult population's growing. New commitments, those with new crimes, make up a pretty good portion of those coming to us, about 2/3, because about 2/3 are successful when they leave, so they don't recidivate. Based upon projections from the Kansas Sentencing Commission and subject to circumstances changing, we'll need a plan to develop additional beds for some point in the future, and I'll talk about that in depth here. So this graph reflects the actual adult population, both men and women. The blue line to the left that starts the extreme left and kind of moves towards the middle is the actual population, and the projected overall population is in the red. And as you can see, headed to the right, it's climbing. The slide is specific to the male population coming to us. It's historical, it's current, and then projected. So again, when you start to the left, that's back in the day a little bit. You can see where it dipped during the pandemic, took a really pretty steady dip that I talked about earlier. And then you can see coming out of that pandemic, it has been a steady climb. So projections indicate a need for additional male beds in 2028. If you see, there's a horizontal blue line at that, there's a capacity box on that slide, and there's a horizontal blue line that extends to the right. Where that intersects that graph, where it's climbing, that's where we're projected. The Sentencing Commission projects we'll need some additional beds for men. So about 2028 in that area. And let me say this, because I don't want to forget it. I don't know if you have the Sentencing Commission coming to appear before you at some point, but Director Schultz and his team at Sentencing Commission do a fantastic job on these projections. They've been doing it for a number of years. They're generally within 1.5% to 2.5% on target, and that's quite the achievement. And so kudos to them. It really helps us for planning, all of us for planning and projecting forward. And then this slide reflects specifically our female prison population. Again, historical, actual, and coming forward. Again, starting from the left, you kind of see some historical stuff. You see the dip associated during the pandemic, and then you see the climb. So projections from the Sentencing Commission are that the population will exceed current bed capacities for women sometime in 2026-27. So that's coming up a little bit quicker. And I'll talk about this a little bit later. We do have a medical and a support services building that is funded this fiscal year and that we're about to move forward on. And I think we can add a few beds there that'll buy us a little bit of time, but it's not going to be an extensive amount. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. So this is community corrections. Supervision, June 30th of each year. That's what the graph, bar graph reflects. So there's community corrections agencies throughout the state, different jurisdictions. They are locally operated, generally, maybe not in all instances, but generally that's county commissioners, whatnot. So local entities form and operate those agencies, and they supervise, most of them supervise both juveniles and adults, typically on probation. Then they receive the bulk of their funding through us. So the state of Kansas provides funding, and there's a grant program. They apply to us. We divvy that money up based on a number of different factors, and it's a diversion from prison. So the cost, if you go back to this, remember that slide I talked about, the cost for them to be supervising them on probation is $2,800 or something like that. That's far less than it costs to incarcerate somebody. So there's some value there. This is post-incarcerated supervision. So again, on June 30th, shows you some statistics. The overall numbers are down from the onset of the pandemic, but going to grow. Looking at the most serious offenses categories for men, predominantly offenses against individuals, about 34%, sex crimes, other person non-sex, about 33%. So 67% of their crimes are against other individuals. For our women, it's mostly drug offenses. That's their largest category at about 43%. This is juvenile community-based services and its population trend. And quickly, I referenced our population in our facility. I think that's the graph at the top on this page. Then you have the total number of juvenile intakes, and each judicial district has an intake center identified. That's where if law enforcement has contact with the child, whether that child has committed a crime, maybe they're in need of care, they've had some form of neglect, what have you, law enforcement can take that child to that intake center for assessment, and then they'll determine what's the best course of action. Does that child need to go to detention? Do they need to be contact Department of Children and Families, or are they returned to the home? And then the bottom graph on that slide is immediate intervention program. That's really diversion. It's a very light touch. It's intended to take juveniles with lower offenses, first-time offenses, and try to divert them from coming to our custody at our juvenile facility. This slide is U.S. incarceration rates for juveniles on 2021, lags a little bit, and it reflects throughout the country per 100,000 youth age 10 through whatever the maximum age is in that jurisdiction. So for Kansas, that would be youth age 10 through 17. How many per 100,000 are coming to incarceration? Kansas appears in the lower third of the graph. It's a little bit hard to read, and it's kind of small. Lower third of the graph at about 106 per 100,000. The red bar that's on that is the U.S. total average, which is 74, so we're a little bit higher than the average, but certainly quite a bit lower than some. And there was some significant juvenile reform done in 2016 under Senate Bill 367 that really reduced the juvenile population significantly and identified other alternatives to trying to keep kids out of the getting too deep in the criminal justice system is very effective. So again, recidivism or success rates, this is the historical information for juveniles. Again, throughout 3 years, similar to the adult population, 2/3 is successful. They don't come back. That's really good news. A little bit about education programming. We can get somebody some of the education that they need, get them a vocational certification, a high school diploma, maybe it's an associate's degree, and then transition them into some kind of work training program. They're going to be a lot better off. Just the education component, they're 25% more likely to get that good job that pays a living wage that I talked about if they get that education. If they work in both, if they get the education and get a work training opportunity, and I'll talk about those in a minute, they're 1/3 less likely to come back to prison. That's a pretty big number. So when you look at this slide on the top half, in 20 years, from the years 2021 through 2020, we had an average of 375 students per year and issued 37 either degrees or vocational technical certifications. That was in a 20-year period, each year average. The bottom half is our efforts from 2020 forward, and the average number of students per year is 679 and about 274 degrees or certifications. So we've upped our game there. Slide is some of the educational programming that's offered, and I'm not going to get into that. You can read that. Our 10 higher ed partners, again, provide services at all 8 adult facilities and our juvenile facility. Again, filling that need for that education and combining that with work is really, really important. Getting that job that pays that living wage is a foundational piece of their success when they return to the community and are back in our neighborhoods. Work opportunities, we're consistently looking to expand work training opportunities for the adult population. Have different opportunities. We have facility work, whether that's custodial, grounds, building maintenance, what have you. Then we have a traditional industries program that's welding, signs, some agriculture. We have 41 private industry partners. Kansas statute allows us to partner with private industry where they can come on-site or off-site, hire our population as a workforce. They pay them a similar wage to what they pay their workforce out in the community. It allows the residents to pay their fines, their fees, their restitution, their child support, gives them an opportunity to get a savings account so when they release, they're not without anything. They have the opportunity to get an apartment, get a vehicle for transportation, and while they're in that private industry program or any of these work opportunities, they really learn how to get up, report to work each day, get along well with others in the workplace, earn those funds, and then just get prepared for returning back to society and that workforce. This is a major IT project for us. It's been ongoing here for a few years. We have some old legacy systems. I think we have one of our systems operationally is a DOS system. For those of you that are IT gurus, that's like from 1978. There's nobody that knows how to fix DOS anymore. So we are coming into the 21st century, and that'll come online, go live in May. That combined with some other technology we believe will make our workforce more mobile, more effective, and more efficient. I referenced earlier work release and substance abuse facility when I highlighted kind of this past year. So the East Campus at Lansing, we opened that in October of this past year. It's a renovated housing unit and some support buildings that had been out of service since we built the new Lansing Correctional Facility, and we occupied that in 2020. Campus provides that substance use recovery and work release out in the community, working, getting more acclimated, because they're typically 6 to 24 months from release, and they're going to be back out in the community. Let's get them out of that institutional mode of operating and get them thinking a little bit more of operating back in the community. So planning began in 2020. We were delayed, some unforeseen construction stuff, and then we didn't have the staffing. It took us a while to get our staffing level back up in that area. But I have to say it's open and it's moving forward, and we're excited about it. This next slide, it gives you a snapshot of the interior of that. It's a different environment. It's not a prison-y, if you will, looking environment, and that's intentional. We're trying to decompress people, get them out of an institutional mindset, getting them into a willing to change and to transition back into the community. So it's got a little bit different look to it. Major capital projects in our 5-year capital improvements plan. I'll just touch on them quickly. FY25, I mentioned we have a support services building at our women's facility in Topeka. That'll be medical, behavioral health, visiting, a central point of entrance. When our current medical and behavioral health services building was constructed, the maximum population at that facility was in the mid to upper 400s. Today, we can house about 980 women at the Topeka Correctional Facility. And our women access medical care in the system at about 1.5 times the rate that our men do. So we need to have that catch up with the numbers that we have there. So that's 2025, 2026. Replace the current facility in Hutchinson. I'll talk about that in a minute. Select raising projects at Lansing. Talk about that. Construct a new warehouse at Lansing with the raising project. Want to convert an existing building in our women's facility in Topeka for work release. Construct a new laundry there. And then in 2027, replace the work release facility in Wichita. We have a 254-bed facility that's right downtown near the Intrust Bank Center. There's a lot of renovation going on in that area, and the city would like us to relocate.
Well, we're rapidly approaching 11:30, so if you could
I'll be quick.
summarize
Here we go.
maybe the last slides, and because I want to give members an opportunity for questions.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. I'll do that. How about I'll pause there and I'll offer, well, I want to make sure you have plenty of time for, so, and then I'll offer if members have questions, concerns, they can reach out to Jennifer, reach out to myself. We're happy to meet with folks. You're welcome to our facilities anytime, anywhere. Come see them, and we'll share whatever we're doing. And I apologize, I ran a little long there.
No, that's all right. You always have a wealth of information to provide, so thank you for being very comprehensive. And with that then, are we having any questions? Sir, Senator Bowser.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for that presentation. Again, very good. Just kind of a quick question here. You talked about population projections and the need for new beds in 2028. Are those new beds included in your 5-year capital plan here?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Senator, we have a proposal to replace the facility at Hutchinson, and I didn't get to that in the presentation, which is fine, but it's aged, and you'll see it in the presentation. I'll leave that for you. If we were to rebuild the Hutchinson Correctional Facility, we would add some beds at that time.
Okay, thank you. That was where I was kind of going with this. And then, so do you anticipate asking for additional funds in the future, or?
Madam Chair, Senator, yes, we do in the future. I think it was in our budget last year's request. It wasn't funded, and again, it's in our capital plan. We'll ask again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Schmidt.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for your time. I have 2-year facilities in my district, and I'd appreciate the opportunity for actually the entire Shawnee County delegation to visit both of them. My question is, how many, I think you mentioned the outpatient facility for individuals on some sort of release. How many of your other facilities offer drug and alcohol counseling?
Madam Chair, Senator, almost all of our facilities have some drug and alcohol counseling. We don't have enough capacity to meet the need. Probably high 60% of our population has a documented substance use problem, whether it's alcohol or other chemicals, and we just don't have enough staff or enough space to deliver that. So what we do is we triage it. Who's getting out? Who's closest to proximity of release? So there's some of that at just about every facility, and then at Topeka, we do have a small work release component where they go out in the community. It's about 22, 25 women there.
And if I may, would you say that if you were able to increase that offering of drug and alcohol counseling throughout the course, the lifespan of how you were contacting and interacting with individuals in your system, it would help and possibly lower the recidivism rates?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Senator, I believe it would. When I walk our facilities, our population that are doing a lot of time that can't get into those programs because they're full with the people that are about to get out, they ask me all the time, could I get that now? I need that now. And we just don't have the capacity. And the capacity is two things. It's the staff or the contractors, and then it's enough space, of the right space in the facilities to do it. So yes, I think it would make a difference.
Thank you. Senator Clays.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for coming today. That is a wealth of information. Many of your incarcerated adults have children, and oftentimes those children are in special education. And special education is unique in that there's a lot of procedural safeguards and requirements like parental consent for placement changes. And of course, we like to have parent participation in IEPs and things like that. What a lot of people here may not know is that even if a child's in foster care or with another family member, the parent oftentimes still has educational rights. That creates a real problem for the school system because we have, students, for example, that may need a specialized program, but you can't legally move them into it without a parent's signature. And when they're incarcerated, that parent's signature is often a challenge for us to get from them. And also, of course, we would like for parents to meaningfully participate in their child's IEP. So I'm just wondering how we can work together to improve that situation. Maybe this is something we take offline, but do you have the technology that would allow you to have at least the Zoom meetings with them? And actually with some school districts, we're actually able to do electronic signatures if they have an email. So anyway, I'd like to work that out because I actually don't deal with it directly. Our great social workers do that, but for them to spend a half day or a day trying to track down something as simple as a signature is just a gross waste of their time. So I would love for us to be able to get that fixed.
Madam Chair, Senator, that connection between family and the incarcerated person is important for that incarcerated person as well, to keep that connectivity. And we know that can help break that cycle of criminality in families. So we would support that. We do have Zoom that we can schedule virtual meetings, and we can work with you to find a way to try to get the signatures. We can give school districts points of contact and make that happen.
Thank you. And I think the Women's Correctional Facility is working on expanding the nursery there for sort of new moms who are incarcerated. Is that right?
Yeah, yes, Madam Chair. At the end of the presentation, you'll see that we want to. I think we'll get to it before the support services building is built, but we were working with some legislators last session, and we're working with some advocacy key groups to determine what that looks like, how long the child would stay there, what kind of services need to be there, and I think we'll get a nursery. There's about 7-8 states that are doing nurseries for newborns from a mother who's incarcerated in prison, and we want to see if we can make that happen.
Thank you. Senator Rose.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Secretary. I have 2 unrelated questions, if that's okay. First question. I heard recently that in prisons, books are not allowed for safety reasons, and you guys are switching to iPads. So my first question is there anything the legislature can do or you can do to use iPads to equip the prisoners to successfully enter the community and have a lower recidivism rate?
Madam Chair, Senator, thanks for the question. So we still have some books in prisons. The problem that we've had with books, and it's not just us, it's nationally, is pages getting soaked with K2, spice, and it's undetectable. You can't see it. So as these books are coming in, it might even be in an Amazon package that somebody's reused and pretending it's coming from Amazon. So we've limited books. We still allow some books, but it's got a much greater level of scrutiny. We have a tablet provider that we contract with, and at no cost to each of our adult and juvenile population, they have a pad, a tablet. That tablet allows them to access their funds account, their balance. They can, it's not the same as an email and it's not the same as a text, but a messaging to their families at a cost. They can access some of their education on some education tablets and some others. And I think as the technology develops and we build enough infrastructure, I think we'll be able to get more books and stuff like that on there.
Excellent, thank you. Second, unrelated question. There's a relatively new private prison facility in eastern Colorado. Has there been any, on I-70, has there been any consideration of leasing that facility rather than building a new facility?
Madam Chair, Senator, when I came to the position in July of 2019, we were at that 10,100. We were at capacity. We did not have any room for our male population. We were utilizing some county jail space. We increased that a little bit more, and I appreciate our county jail partners. They're great. But even that wasn't going to be enough. So we contracted with a private entity, and we sent 120 men to Arizona in a private facility there. That's where the beds were open. It's the same facility that I believe owns that facility that you're referencing in eastern Colorado. They were there for about 11 months, and then the pandemic hit, numbers started dropping, and we were able to bring them back. So if I hope this answers your question, if we get to capacity and we don't have beds, that'll have to be a consideration, is to contract for beds, either counties or private partners.
Thank you. And Senator Bowers.
That was the perfect segue. So thank you, Senator Rose, for asking that. And Jeff, always fun to work with you. I'm always talking about our rural county jails. I so would prefer they stay in the state rather than going out of state. So just to make sure that you know that our county jails are there, I know you do, but so that incident doesn't happen to Colorado, do we need to work with our county jails? Because that number is coming. I was startled when I saw it during the interim too. But to make sure that we're all federally doing everything we need, and with yours, so much would rather see our counties utilized than going out of state. So if I can help with that situation, because I have 14 counties, and we can see how we can all work together to make that happen. So I know I pester you about that all the time, Jeff. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, Senator, thanks for your comments. I don't think you're pestering me about it. We're far better if they can stay in state. They're closer to their families. It's typically a lower cost if we can do that. So maybe we'll work with you and see who can meet the standards. You know, there are some standards that we have to meet, and if we can do that, I'd much rather keep them in state. You bet. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we're going to wrap up questions due to time constraints, so please see the Secretary if you have additional follow-up questions. And thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, for coming and your very thorough presentation. Always appreciate that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the committee.
It's a good way to start off our session year also to hear the updates, so thank you. With that, then, we'll invite Kansas Legal Services for an overview and Executive Director Matt Keenan. So please introduce yourself and welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Matthew Keenan, native Kansan, originally from Great Bend, graduated KU Law School in 1984. I practiced law in a large firm in the metro for about 37 years and then took on this job. I'm in my third year now. I'll have two introductions. TK Shively is with me from Kansas Legal Services and Matthew Cruz as well. I'm going to take about 10 minutes and give you an overview for those of you who may not appreciate what Kansas Legal Services is in, but I want to start with 3 major observations. Number one, you've heard a lot about criminal justice. You heard, I understand, from the public defender group a couple days ago. Kansas Legal Services is entirely civil. We don't have any involvement with individuals, generally speaking, who are charged with criminal matters. We are the lifeblood of communities that have a shrinking number of lawyers, that have populations that can't afford lawyers, and largely Kansans who are trying to get ahead. We represent about 23,000 Kansans in all 105 counties in the state. And the one thing I want to impart to you is we are a constituent service. So when you go back and you talk to the judges or the magistrates, the district attorneys, they should know Kansas Legal Services. They should have a high regard for Kansas Legal Services. We have 45 attorneys. We have 11 offices, as far west as Dodge City and northeast, Hayes, Manhattan, Emporia. Every one of you has a KLS office in your district, and it's my pride and joy to really oversee the operation that we do. And so we ultimately make your communities, your constituencies, better, safer, stronger. So I want to give just a couple overviews about what we do. I have hard copies of some slides here. I'm not going to go through them because I'm a little pressed for time. But keep in mind that we're a nonprofit. We get about half of our funding, about $4.5 million from Congress. I'm happy to say that Senators Marshall and Moran know what we do, understand what we do, and support what we do. We get about $3 million from the state of Kansas. Different agencies fund us. DCF funds us. We get money from the judicial budget. And we get about $500,000 in private donations from funders who understand what we do and want to support what we do. We partner with a lot of nonprofit agencies in your district. So I'm talking about United Way, Catholic Charities. I'm talking about housing agencies. We do a lot of work with the county attorneys and the judges. The thing about United Way and Catholic Charities is they don't have lawyers. So we have the lawyers who can specialize in troubleshooting and solving the problems of the working poor in your districts. We have corporate sponsors in Kansas that understand what we do and support what we do. T-Mobile is a big supporter of what we do, and they help us put on clinics. And Senator Warren came to one of our clinics in Olathe. Senator Haley had to leave, but we do 2 major clinics in Kansas City, Kansas every year. Koch Industries understands what we do, and they're all about second chances, and they support what we do both in terms of bringing volunteers and supporting us financially. And I expect that next year I'll be reporting on partnerships with Cargill and Garmin. We're really excited about that. So let me give you a couple examples, specific examples of things that we do that might have relevance to your outlook. Senator Reichman, I know you're from Meade, and I have asked for examples from some of the attorneys about specific clients we've helped in your district. And I got this report from a woman. This is what the attorney from Dodge City said. It's a 71-year-old female who just learned she had cancer and wanted to make sure she had her affairs in order. She didn't have many assets. I advised her on non-probate transfers, payable on death. She was also struggling to find someone she trusted to act as an attorney. In fact, we're working on that. So that's an example. I'll give an example. In Concordia, Robert Walsh is a good friend of mine. This is a case of a mother who was back on her feet after having years of addiction, and she was struggling to have an attorney, to find an attorney to help her. And she now is going to AA. Her life is together, but the original parenting plan that was in place when she was struggling, she couldn't get changed. So the KLS attorney in Salina helped her change the parenting plan that she had in place, and we did something for her that no other attorney would do. She didn't have any money, and there's not a lot of attorneys in Concordia, although it's a wonderful place there. I've got a couple other examples. Disaster advocacy. I know Senator Titus isn't here, but Westmoreland had a tornado, and this is a big thing with our major funding organization, Legal Services Corporation, is They fund initiatives for our attorneys to interface with residents who are impacted by natural disasters. And so we were involved on the ground with a lot of community meetings. The studies say that an individual impacted by a natural disaster could have anywhere from 10 to 15 separate legal problems. And we have one attorney who spends about 20% of her time on these specific cases. And even today, she has 2 clients from Westmoreland who were impacted by that tornado. As you might imagine, the insurance, I mean, you lose everything in this day and age where identity and proof of ID is so important. There's an enormous amount of problems. Another example, family law. We do limited family law. We turn away about 70% of the people who need help because we don't have the bandwidth. But we do limited family law cases. And when you talk about these jurisdictions that have a shrinking number of lawyers, most of the lawyers that are there don't want to get involved in family law. Another area we do a lot with, and I know we have veterans on this, is we got a grant from the VA for veterans who are at risk of homelessness. And so we have an attorney who is interfacing a lot with the VAs around the state, and we were able to do that work for free. We do a lot of work with Social Security Administration. As you might imagine, anyone dealing with the government these days, it's extremely frustrating. We have specialists who deal with, and I'm talking about people who might be entitled to survivor benefits or disability or just trying to get the benefits that they've already earned. We have specialists who know how to deal with the Social Security Administration, know how to challenge them, know how to appeal those determinations, and that's a huge part of what we do. 2 other ones I want to describe, and then I'll have hopefully a little time for questions. Driver's license restoration is a huge part of what we do. Now, let me tell you, I'm going to take a few minutes to tell you the little story about how we got here. We made a request to our national funding agency in Congress for what they call a pro bono innovation fund. And pro bono is kind of the term of art for lawyers who are working for free. We received from essentially Congress $340,000 to set up a series of driver's license restoration projects. Some of you know Kansas has about 220,000 Kansans who have suspended driver's licenses. Now, the reasons why those licenses are suspended might surprise you. It's not because they had a DUI. It's not because generally they were in an accident. They get a suspended driver's license because they might miss a court date or they didn't pay a fine. So just take, for example, gardens. Now, the Department of Revenue for the state of Kansas, they keep statistics. You can call them and find out what county. You can call, I know in Miami County has 704, somebody over here is from Miami County, 743 suspended licenses. Okay, listen to this. Garden City, where unemployment is 2.5%, there's 5,000 residents that have suspended licenses there. It's 6.4%. So we have taken this as a cause for us with this funding. And I have a handout here that's in your materials, but we've had tremendous success. And the legislature has made it easier for judges to restore driver's licenses. All of these cases need to have a judge at some point approve it, okay? But we've had, with this project, we've had 90 driver's licenses reinstated and 42 licenses that were previously completely suspended to be restricted, with an estimated economic impact of $2.7 million. So that is kind of the prototypical client that we're helping, somebody who's trying to get ahead and something is holding them back. So I bring this up because it's certainly our hope that the success that we've had with these driver's license restorations clinic, that we can replicate that with some additional funding from the legislature. And I'm really not here to talk about that right now, but this is a huge area of unmet need. And none of us really know for sure what the impact of some of these immigration initiatives are going to have, but there's no question that if somebody can't drive, they're going to have a difficult time paying their fines and fees and getting back on their feet. So driver's license restoration is a huge part of what we're doing, but it's a very small part of what we're doing. And the last thing I want to mention is expungement. And I do have a slide on this. I don't know if, I think it's like the 9th slide. Expungements are another great story. It's expungement clinics. I think it's the 9th page. You can put it up. I want to speak briefly about expungements. In this day and age, every employer is doing background checks. People who aren't even hiring are doing background checks. And 1 in 3 Americans has some criminal offense in their background. 1 in 3. And what you're seeing is Kansans, so there, that this is really informative, I think, because we started this initiative of clinics, and we go out around Kansas. We have been to, you can see some of the cities there that we've listed this. Independence, Kansas, Pittsburgh, McPherson, Salina, Abilene, Topeka, Great Bend, Hayes, Dodge City, Hutchinson. I know we have a Clays here. Your brother came to our one in Abilene. And these clinics are wonderful because the judges love them, the county attorneys love them, and we're not going to get an expungement for a client unless they both approve. But Kansas has a set of statutes that are pretty forward-looking that allow the potential for an expungement depending on a lot of circumstances, and that's why you need to have an attorney normally help the applicant navigate, but allows them to wipe away criminal matters that are old, that are dated, and either are holding them back emotionally or holding them back in terms of the workforce. We call it Project Second Chance. And I think you heard from the secretary talking about getting people back on their feet after they leave prison. What we're talking about people that in most cases never went to prison, in some cases just simply were arrested. And these things are holding them back. And so these clinics that we've done have been a real big success. In Great Bend, for example, my hometown, we used the community center, and we had Catholic Charities and United Way help find clients and send them to us. We spent a day there. We assisted probably 25 people. Most of the cases we've pre-cleared with the judge and the county attorney. In many cases, they might know the individual involved. And so this is another initiative that we get funding from the legislature. It's not in the OJA funding because, for reasons that I still don't quite understand, it's not included in that. It has to be specially added. I'm not asking for that now, but I just wanted to raise your awareness because with that $200,000, we've been able to do a lot of good. We have about 5 attorneys who do this probably half-time, so they know it, they've learned it, and then they teach other volunteers. We've had about 100 Kansas attorneys who now are volunteering pretty regularly for these clinics. So the bottom line is we did a study. If you could, let's see, I don't know if, I'm running out of time, but we did a study that showed the economic impact of what we do, getting people better jobs, liberating them from their mistakes in the past, getting them the benefits, whether it's Social Security or VA benefits, has an economic impact of $75 million. For every $1, it has about a $7 impact in the communities. Our budget, our total budget's about $10 million. So bottom line is we make communities where you may not have lawyers at all, and the lawyers that are there, they don't know how to do an expungement. We are giving back and contributing to your communities, and we are constituent service, and I think we do a very good job at that. So I wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions, but I thank you for your time.
Thank you for, again, that wealth of information, too, about services that I don't think many Kansans are aware of. So are you educating Kansans that you guys are around? And
well, it's interesting in an era where if you turn on the TV and you see an attorney advertising about, have a wreck, get a check, we can't solicit clients. We can't advertise. Now, we do have a lot of partners to get the word out, but we get about 220 phone calls a day to our intake center. So a lot of, certainly in these areas of the driver's license and expungement, people, they don't know of these opportunities. We've done a very good job of creating a lot of publicity, a lot of news stories, a lot of TV stations and newspapers like the feel-good nature of what we do. And so we have had quite a bit of news stories, but there's still a lot of people that don't know of these opportunities, and we're doing all we can to change that.
well, it was neat to see the folks at the expungement center and the interaction between the attorneys and Kansans coming in, seeing if they could find some relief for their issue that they had on expungement questions. So thanks for providing that. Committee, are there any questions? Yes, Senator Corson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for being here. One of the things you didn't touch on, but that I think is a wonderful service, and I want to make sure my colleagues know about it, are the self-help clinics that you've done in 11 counties. Can you just talk a little bit about those and the services that are offered through that? I think those are a huge benefit to those communities.
So if I could get the IT guy, could you go back just one more slide to, I have a slide on the self-help centers. What, members of the committee, what you will find if you talk to judges in these counties, in your counties, in Johnson County, about half the people that go to court have no attorney. They either can't find an attorney, can't pay attorney, or think they can do it themselves. And this has been a really important initiative, these self-help centers. Now, we get this funding from the Supreme Court funding, but what we have is we have an individual at court, typically with their own space, and it's a resource for people who come in and have questions. So today on Thursday, we have a person in the Johnson County Court, but as you can see, we're spread out, and if you are interested in us starting this service in one of your county courts, I would say talk to me, and we will ask the Supreme Court for additional funding, because this is funding to worry about. This is a service we're provided by the Supreme Court. I know you heard from the chief yesterday. This is under the Access to Justice, ATJ. But what happens basically is an attorney is there, and they're there all day, and people come in, and we don't represent anybody. We give them advice and counseling. And honestly, about 75% of the time, they need to be told directly, you're wasting your time. There's a lot of misinformation about people's rights and responsibilities, and that's an important service. That's an important service for someone to be told, you're too emotional wrapped up in this. You need to dedicate your energy into something else. But on the other hand, there are cases where we help people fill out the forms. We help people understand what they can and can't do at court. But these judges, of course, love us because we help them run their dockets. And the court personnel, if you've been to court, if you've been to the clerk of the court, there's a huge sign that says we cannot offer legal advice. So we're there, and we help speed up the system. And so the self-help centers are a huge part of what we do, and it's a growing part of what we do because the numbers of people who are showing up without attorneys is only going to continue to increase.
Thank you for touching on that subject too. Committee, are there other questions? Senator Shane.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Keenan, for your time today. One brief statement and then one question. I'd be interested in understanding for expungement and driver's licenses, if there's opportunities for streamlining those processes and advocating for our citizens so that they're not spending so much time tying themselves up with, legal need and whatnot. So I think that would be a conversation I think would be interesting to many of us as senators to understand if there's opportunities to make things better for our citizens in that regard.
Absolutely. I mean, you're preaching to the choir on that. Please know that I've gone for 20 minutes. I haven't mentioned AI, so I'm going to do it right now. But they are coming out with a lot of software where the self-represented applicant can navigate all of these things very, very quickly. And in some cases, it might be just going to an attorney and saying, I've done all this, you think we're in good shape. Yes, there's no question that they're making great strides in empowering people who can't find an attorney or can't get an attorney to do some of these things themselves. I think 2 or 3 years from now, you're going to see a transformation in that regard. Right now, most of those tools are expensive. I'd rather be at not at the leading edge of some of these things, but yes, there's no question. We're going to make progress, but Kansas will probably be near the end. But I think it is happening, and I think there's a lot of really great potential there because this attorney shortage is only going to grow. And I would say one other thing, the technology we're allowing remote appearances to court hearings in Seward County or pick your county, that helps us a lot because although we do have an attorney in Dodge City, for him to go to Seward County is quite an effort, and we're making some progress with courts allowing him to appear remotely, but we've got a ways to go there too. So, yeah.
And then my question is, do you work at all or leverage the state's research and extension network, since that's present in all 105 counties, to access potential citizens in need in all those counties?
I'm going to direct that to TK. Do you know? No? I think that's maybe something we need to be exploring. I appreciate that. I'll give you my card and we can talk about that. But we don't want to reinvent the wheel on anything. And but we still have a lot to learn in that regard. So.
I want to mention, do we have any other questions before? I have one question. We heard on Tuesday from bids and about pay, quite frankly, for the attorneys, and was wondering with the Kansas Legal Services attorneys, how does their compensation compare to, for instance, bids to our prosecutors? Now, I understand we're talking criminal attorneys versus working in the civil area, but is the pay parity kind of there, or it's not?
It's not. It's not. I mean, with all the pay increases that bids has received, we're lagging quite a bit, at least $10,000 or more on starting salary. Bids has done us a favor in other ways too, because there are some individual county contracts that we have where we're paid on an hourly basis. For example, child advocacy matters like child in need of care contracts, and we are requesting the bids $120 an hour rate, which they pay to outside lawyers when they have a conflict. So bids has helped us, but we're easily $10,000 less than what they're paying starting attorneys. We're catching up. We are, and that's been a big priority of mine. But as a nonprofit that relies on funding largely from the state and from Congress, it's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge.
With different roles to play also. When we're talking about the criminal context, obviously we're filling a constitutional right to defense counsel in the criminal context versus in the civil. There's not the same constitutional right or obligation of the state to provide an attorney when you can't afford one. So,
like I said, there's really no civil matters of what I've been talking about. There's not a single one where anyone has a right to an attorney. And a lot of people don't understand that. Even lawyers of my vintage don't fully appreciate that. So this is good. I think this is really informative, and hopefully we can keep these conversations going.
absolutely. Well, and I wanted to mention on a personal note, Mr. Keenan and I have worked together. You mentioned you were in private practice for 37 years, I think, and you can tell in his private practice, if you haven't seen from his presentation, but I will mention, I think he was the director of the pro bono services section of the large private law firm that you worked at. So yeah, I think you can see his servant's heart, and with the pro bono work that now he does exclusively, but that has always been part of his private practice, I think, as well.
Right. Well, someone told me, learn, earn, return. So I've got a lot of returning to do.
Well, you are doing a good job. So thank you for helping Kansans with Kansas Legal Services and for your presentation today. And just so you know, the clock in here is a few minutes fast, so it is now noon, not after 12 o'clock. But thank you also to staff for finding our meeting room today as well. So we can't run our committee without you guys, who are very important. So with that then, want to wish everyone a good weekend, and go Chiefs. There's a big Chiefs game on Saturday, and then we will see each other in committee on Tuesday. So thank you very much. With that, we are adjourned.